Hey, John, I want to ask you this. I probably should have texted you and just given you a heads up, but you love Cardinals history, so I thought you're someone that's got the perspective. Not like sort of like me. I never saw Ken Boyer play really, not live or over a period of time. But do you think that people they took a hard look and did a lot of research on Scott Rowland, and they saw why he was a Hall of Famer. They went beyond the counting stats. Do you think that could help a guy like the beloved Ken Boyer make it through with when he goes before his case goes before a committee, I believe, in 2025? Does Rowland getting in help Kenny Boyer?
I think it could, Bernie. There's only 18 third basemen in the history of the Hall who've gotten in. Kenny Boyer, my late father's absolute favorite Cardinal of all time. He loved Kenny Boyer. He used to always tell me how great he was. I think when you talk to Walt Jocketty, somebody who traded for Scott Rowland twice, when you talk to the managers, look at the managers he played for. He played for Dusty Baker. He played for Tony La Russa. He played for, legendary managers, and they all raved about the guy. Look how he ran the bases. Look how he defended. Look how he did everything the right way. Look how he moved runners over. And, not to mention he hit at least 25 home runs, 7 of his first 8 years. And I think, when people got to talking to, real baseball people who they really respect, there's nobody in this game who has more respect than Tony La Russa and Dusty Baker. And they both raved about the guy and said, one of the most complete players that they've ever coached. Well, then that sounds like a Hall of Famer. And, I hope Todd Helton gets in, and I think Billy Wagner's got a shot next year as well. But like you said, Kenny Boyer, my dad knew more about baseball than I'll ever remember. And if he told me that Kenny Boyer was one of the best players he ever saw, I'd take him for his word and believe that Kenny Boyer probably deserves to be in the Hall of Fame.
John, I'm not asking you to speak for the baseball writers. My point is not to attack them. And this is a historical thing that goes way, way back. But every now and then they develop, or just as a group, it's collective, probably not even realizing it, but they kind of develop a blind spot. Like you mentioned third base. There's only been 2 third basemen who began their career in the post-expansion era, 1961 to current. Only 2 guys that started their career then, after the expansion came in, have made it to the Hall of Fame. That's Chipper Jones and now Scott Rowland, guys from that era. That's amazing to me. And then the other thing is, like you mentioned, there's only 18 all time, 17 if you don't include Molitor, who played most of the time at DH. But anyway, take a look at center field, specifically center field. It's unbelievable how few pure, true center fielders in the Hall of Fame. I just wonder why these blind spots develop. And by the way, I voted a long time, and I'm guilty of it my own self. So I'm not really criticizing anybody else. It's strange.
Yeah, that makes no sense. Like anybody who's ever played baseball knows the best athletes on the field are, when you're growing up, pitcher, shortstop, center fielder. Like those are where you put your best players because they can do everything. Anybody who watched Andrew Jones play defense for a 5-year period, 10-year period, knows that he was one of the best, defensive center fielders of all time. And, I think Andrew Jones will get in eventually. I just don't understand how Scott Rowland gets 10% of the vote his first year on the ballot. These are people who know baseball. These are people who know how good Scott Rowland was. He got the lowest percentage of anybody ever to get in the Hall of Fame. And, he hadn't picked up a bat in the last 6 years, but he went from 10% that first year to 76% this year. Scott Rowland hadn't done anything over the last 6 years. So I don't understand the penance that guys have to pay. It's like, if you deserve to get in now, you probably should deserve to get in 6 years ago. And like you said, they turn blind spots to certain positions. Nolan Arenado said the other day, used to, back in the old days, the team would kind of put their lunkhead guy who couldn't run, they would stick him at third, and he stuck out like a sore thumb. But when you look at some of the athletes that have played third base now, Beltre's going to get in, Arenado's going to get in eventually. Those are great athletes, guys who did it all, and it's starting to come around where you don't just stick some, defensive woefully defensive guy at third, you put one of your best athletes at third base.
Yeah, I think it's going to change. I think as the voting body gets a little younger and is more into advanced metrics, things like that, where you can go beyond just looking at counting stats or whatever. There's been a pretty big change in that area anyway. I mean, that's a large reason, as you know, that Roland did get through, because when people could look at his base running metrics and his defensive metrics and compare them all time, in defensive wins above replacement, and his base running was remarkably good. And I remember those days very finely.
Sorry to interrupt you. I mean, you got to be a real baseball nerd to know a guy's a good base runner. But I mean, Scott Rowland was so much better than everybody else. Like, it stood out how good of a base runner he is. And to relate it to today's game, everybody in the game says Paul Goldschmidt's that same kind of guy. You always notice Paul Goldschmidt never gets thrown out. I think he has the longest active stolen base streak in baseball. He hadn't been thrown out in like 6 years because he knows when to go. He knows how to run the bases. He always hits the base with his right foot on the inside corner. He's the same sort of guy. Like, his base running is so much better than everybody else's. It stands out.
John Denton with us from MLB.com. And again, follow him on Twitter at John Denton 555. I've been talking about this a little bit. Jeff Gordon wrote a piece about it today at STL Today, which was good because I want to see what other people have to say, you included. Should the Cardinals pursue a left-handed reliever? I mean, a good left-handed reliever. And there are some guys out there, and I know probably their prices have been a little too high. But do you think that that's something that they need or something that they're going to pursue?
I think they do need it. I don't know that they're definitely going to, necessarily going to pursue it now. I think it could be something down the line, closer to the trade deadline. We kind of talked about this the other day. It's been kind of a disappointing offseason. They didn't spend as much as most fans thought. They didn't get the players most people thought they needed. But I think there is wiggle room there down the line. I don't know about the sensibility of going into camp depending on Cabrera. Cabrera really had a terrible second half last year. He was never the same after having COVID. He threw the 4-inning game at Wrigley. He was unbelievable, but he never was the same after that. They have high hopes for Zach Thompson. Zach Thompson's a guy who went to the minors. He worked with Ryan Helsley. He worked with Jason Isringhausen. He jacked his velo up to 96, 97, 98 miles an hour, and that was shocking to him. They have high hopes. I think he's going to get a shot at that left-handed role. But, Bernie, and I know, and John Mozeliak knows, you can never have enough left-handers as the long season goes along. And, Andrew Chafin is out there. He opted out of a big contract. I think he was due $6 million a year. He opted out of that, and now here he is, 2 weeks before training camp, and he doesn't have a deal. But look at his numbers. There's a couple other good relievers that are on the market. I would think, if the Cardinals are going to spend that money, hey, spend it now so you get a full season out of the guy. Don't wait until, closer to the deadline. I would like to see them, spend that money and go get another left-hander now.
Matt Moore, after being moved out of a rotation, is in a relief role now, and he was fantastic last year. I mean, just great strikeout rate, everything you're looking at. And he's been a pretty durable guy. Zach Britton kind of worries me a little because he's broken down, too often. And I don't know at his age whether that, makes him more vulnerable to that happening again.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of teams that are kind of playing chicken with the Tigers guy now. They're trying to get him to blink. That's kind of the same way with Moore. Like you said, Moore's numbers were off the charts. I think he held hitters to 160 last season. So right now it's a game of chicken. The teams are waiting, hoping that a player will cave in because, every day it gets closer to spring training, somebody's going to cave in and take a lesser deal or take a one-year deal. And especially with a guy, like you said, with Britton, you don't want to give him multiple years if you can avoid it, considering his injury history.
John, I wanted to ask you about something else, and Chip Carey confirmed it and talked about it on Twitter, so it's not like we're talking about state secrets here. We assume, obviously, when the Cardinals get a chance, they themselves will make it official. But I just wanted to ask you because, you growing up where you have been and familiar with the South and familiar with the Atlanta Braves and certainly familiar with the Cardinals because you're lifelong fandom of the Cardinals before you became a a writer. What did you think? What do you think of Chip Caray coming in to replace or succeed Dan McLaughlin?
Everything I heard, I really liked Aaron Goldsmith, the guy who's with the Mariners,
Right,
St.
right.
Louis native, really good guy. But that didn't work out. He ended up staying. But with Chip Caray, you're getting a guy who is a proven pro. He's a guy with a name. He's a guy with lineage in this organization. And I've known Chip for a long time. His last season with the Orlando Magic, that was his first job in broadcasting. Was the Orlando Magic, the expansion team. They hired him. His last year in Orlando was my first year covering the team, so I know Chip a little bit. We both lived in Winter Park, Florida, so we have a lot to talk about. And everybody's going to miss Danny Mack, no doubt about it. But I think Chip was a slam dunk. He's a guy you don't say no to. Like I said, Harry Caray broadcast the Cardinals for a lot. The younger generation doesn't realize Harry Caray was in St. Louis for 25 years. Skip, his dad, did the NBA games with the Hawks before they moved to Atlanta. You don't turn a blind eye to that sort of history, and you can kind of help bring this whole Caray family circle to back around again. And he's a proven pro. Not everybody in Atlanta likes him, but guess what? Not everybody's going to like him in St. Louis. Some are going to love him, some are going to hate him, and you just kind of deal with that. In this profession, and I think Chip Caray is an absolute slam dunk home run for the Cardinals because he's a guy who's done it before, and he knows the game, and he's going to do a good job.
Yeah, I said the other day, I know him pretty well too, although I have not really had an in-depth conversation with him for a while because I'm not around the ballpark very much, and that's my bad. But I think he's a gem of a person. And I know, based on the conversations I've had, just like you've had these conversations, I'm sure, St. Louis Cardinals baseball means an incredible amount to him, means a lot. And St. Louis means a lot, although he'd also be the first to tell you it wasn't necessarily, a happy childhood because, his parents split up. Then he moved to Atlanta with Skip. And then wanted to come back to St. Louis and be with his mom. And, he had to deal with a lot of things as a kid. And I know a lot of kids out there do too. But he's got an immense soft spot for St. Louis. And to your point, knowing his grandfather's history here and knowing his father's history here, this is combining the love of a franchise that has meant a lot to him, but also like you said, just sort of also bringing that family circle all the way around to where it all started. And when Chip would come back to St. Louis with the Braves, and I probably would talk to him every time because I wanted to find out where he went. And, he would just drive around the whole area. He'd go relive memories. He'd get very sentimental and emotional. And that's why when I heard that they were doing this, I thought, you know what? They got the right guy. They got the right guy because he gets it. And he's been part of this extended Cardinals family in his own way. Sorry for making a speech, but,
No. When you go into this, the first thing you want to accomplish is you want to get a guy who wants to be here. Like, nobody wants to be here more than Chip Caray. Like, a lot of people know that Cardinal baseball is special, that Cardinal baseball is different than anywhere else in the country. There may be a couple of others that rival it, but, Chip Caray knows that. Chip Caray's lived that, for the first 18 years of his life, when he lived here, other than those 3 years in Atlanta. And, there's a heartbreaking story. The Major League Baseball, MLB Network did a documentary on Harry, and Chip admitted that there was a Little League game where Harry
so
came
sad.
her grandson, and he didn't even recognize his grandson. It was heartbreaking to Chip, and so I think this is a way for Chip to kind of reconnect with his grandfather, even though his grandfather's long gone, and bring this thing full circle. It kind of gives you goosebumps to think about. Like, if anybody in the world had a chance to go back and maybe take the same job that your father did or your grandfather had, and make them proud, everybody would jump at that opportunity. And I think Chip's an absolute slam dunk for this position. And from what I'm hearing, it sounds like it's going to become official tomorrow. So,
well, that's great. It's good to hear.
Knowing their man.
And I'm really looking forward to hearing it and reading your piece about it. And I'm sure he'll have a lot of great quotes, meaningful quotes. So it'll be a really wonderful day tomorrow for Chip Caray, who's such a great guy. And the Cardinals are staying with their roots too, and I always think that that's a great thing. So, John, you're the best because you're so kind, and thanks for helping me out today. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Bernie. Take care. Have a good night.
All right, you too. That's our good friend John Denton, who's amazing. And the Cardinals will make that official tomorrow. That's unofficial, but that appears to be the case. And I look forward to hearing what Chip Caray has to say. And in due time, when things settle down, we'll get him on the show. He always used to come on my show at the other place that I worked. In fact, would even say, well, I'll come out to the studio and hang out. I mean, that's the kind of guy he is. Really like him a lot. And I think you'll all love him personally. Now, look, all broadcasters, even my friend Dan McLaughlin, you can name any broadcaster you want. They're going to do things that drive you nuts, you know? They're just as broadcasters.
Yeah.
They're just going to do things that you personally don't like. And, you know, with Chip, the criticism has been like he'll get all excited about a fly ball and, it's caught like before the warning track, things like that. Look, all announcers do that stuff. So no one's saying that you have to love his broadcasting. There may be some things that you love, like there may be some things that you really find annoying. You know what? That's true of every broadcaster who ever lived in baseball. So, but I'm telling you, the kind of man he is, that is something that we should all agree, universal way. They found a really good man to take this job. So don't forget that part, too, and don't forget what this means to him. He's not coming here for a paycheck. He already had a paycheck. He's not coming here because he wants to be a hotshot. He's coming here with humility. He's humble because this is his hometown. The family lineage we've already talked about. This thing means the world to him, and I'm totally on his side. I'm wishing for nothing but the best. So everybody treat him fairly. That's all I ask. And some of you are probably bristling at that. That's all right too, because I'm a grouch. I get it.